Evening. This is Carla from MindPlore with Carla and Friends, and we are here to speak today about reframing joy and what does joy really mean. Now, I'm very honored to have Jeanne, Alford, Jeanne, Locke, Alford with me, and Michelle Peticolas. They are going to introduce themselves. Jeannie, I need you to take over because I need to do some background stuff, and I will be with you. And yes, I will put the YouTube channel in there.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you, Carla. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning,
Michelle. Good evening, Michelle. We're going to be talking today about reframing joy. And Carla and I were discussing this because last week when we were talking about managing mindset, something came up that was interesting. And that was that we tend to get so crazy busy and we see that the joy is in the adrenaline rush versus the joy in being joyful. And I wanted to explore this with Carla and Friends, because I think when we reframe joy, we might find that we're living a great life, even though sometimes our ego mind says we're not. So I don't know if that's what's going to come up, but we'll see. So I found two quotes I wanted to share. One is from the great American philosopher, Anonymous. Reframing is a general method of changing the meaning of something and therefore changing. Reframing is a general method of changing the meaning of something and thereby changing. And then from Elaine Aron, who wrote The Highly Sensitive Person, writes, reframing is a term from cognitive psychotherapy, which simply means seeing something in a new way, in a new context, with a new frame around it. And that's actually what I was thinking when we were talking about it. Michelle, how does that feel for you?
Oh my gosh, it is exactly what I was thinking about this morning, about how the unconscious mind, the early programming that we have, will cause us to see the world with specific glasses framed in a particular way. And there is so much out there in the world for us to notice, but we frame it according to what we expect to see. Therefore, if you break open that pattern and look with new eyes, you will actually see different things than if you were just going by habit. And so that's, for me, is what reframing is. It's actually sometimes framing the picture differently. You think about, you have a photograph in Photoshop or in Canva, and you reframe the picture to maybe have it closer or maybe wider, and that it actually has a different impact when you change the frame. So I love that definition.
Isn't it kind of like, as you were talking, I was trying to stop myself, but you know how we tend to start thinking about what we're going to say? So I wanted to stop myself, but so let me get a second to get my head back in. But when you were talking about reframing the picture on Canva, it dawns on me that when we watch a movie 2, 3, 8 dozen times, we always see something different. And sometimes some of the best directors put so much information in every frame that there's no way we can see it. But then when we see it over and over, we go, oh, I didn't realize that. Or, wow, did you notice that before? And that helps reframe that movie, those tiny little things. So when you're talking about Canva, I'm thinking about that big landscape. And then you expand it and you go over to the corner where there's a rock and a daisy coming out from under it. And now that becomes, instead of a big landscape, it becomes a picture of resiliency. That's the word that's trying to come out, resiliency, because those daisies, no matter what's going on, they're coming up. Or whatever flower.
It's so true. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind my saying a little bit about who I am. I know that your viewers know who you are, Jeanne, and they certainly know who Carla is. I thought I would say a little bit about myself because I am a life transformation coach. That means I literally help people to reframe their lives. A lot of people come to me after a major life challenge and they're feeling overwhelmed, they're feeling swamped, they're feeling discouraged. And I literally help them to see with new glasses, to see their lives in a different way, to see the challenge not as a disaster, but actually as a push from the universe to shift. That when we look at change in our lives as an opportunity or as an invitation to shift, it changes that frame. So
it's opportunity.
It's opportunity. So that's the work I do. I have a program called Second Chance Secrets, which is giving you a second chance, a reframing of your life so that you can actually bring more joy and happiness into your life. And,
that's
go on.
That's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this, because literally off the show, somebody said, I've been so busy and I've been getting everything done, but the last 3 days it's just been boring. And I thought, that could be joyful if you looked at joy differently.
Indeed.
And it seems that we have so many messages coming at us that we need to be busy, that we need to have drama, that we need to have something that makes us feel like we have a purpose, but the purpose is fleeting. It's about, what's the issue of the day. And so we don't take time as often, the royal we, of course, don't take time to just, sit back and go and appreciate what we have and what we're doing and who we are. So that led me to say to this person, have you ever tried meditation? And I found out that this person hadn't. And I was like, we need to actually be in the moment and let's take a deep breath. And it just seems to me that we're so focused on running and running hard that we forget to enjoy the cry of a baby, or, when your dog jumps up at you because they're so excited to see you. I mean, literally, I have dogs to remind me of unconditional love. That's why I think I always have dogs in my life. And joy comes from unconditional love. And if we're not open to seeing it in the moment, I think we have a problem. And that's deep inside.
Well, I love that idea of dogs or cats pulling you back into the moment, because most of us, we're in a culture in which it's a run, run, run. We're all like hyped up on caffeine mostly. And so the idea of slowing down isn't even on our radar. Also, there's a way in which we are staying busy all the time because that's how we were programmed to survive when we were children. I don't know about your mother, but my mother was the kind of person who, if you weren't doing something, she would find something for you to do. Boy, if that was an invitation to stay busy all the time, because usually what she came up with was not quite what you wanted to be doing.
Yeah, I really didn't like weeding the yard so much. That's what she would do. Go out and weed the yard.
My mom, go down and clean the basement. Oh.
Yeah, there were always chores. I remember always having chores and feeling like as I grew older, my chore list went like this, just kept getting bigger and bigger. But yeah, if you recall, well, I'm old enough to remember that idle hands were the devil's workshop.
I remember that. Yeah.
We weren't allowed to be contemplative or contemplative. But it was funny. We were supposed to sit still and do prayer, and that's supposed to be 10 or 15 minutes of sitting still, but there was a group of 7 of us, my brothers and sisters. We were so busy being busy that it was a real chore to sit us down, even when we were in a church with 500 people around us. The priest would look down and take pity on my mother and go, "Children, God can see you."
Right. So now you're, oh my gosh, I have to stay busy, because if I'm not busy, I'll have to go out and weed the garden. But I can't be busy in church. I have to be something else, but I don't have any practice at it. And it actually feels scary to do that. I think it is really important to realize how strong that programming is, that when you try and change that programming, you're going to actually get some messages from your memory and from your subconscious and your ego telling you, ooh, that's not a good thing to do. You better get up right away. Look at all the things you have to do.
Yeah, it's amazing. Carla.
Thank you. And that's the problem, is that we are not, our mindsets are, oh, we got to be busy. We got to be doing this. And instead of taking a breath in and listening to what we feel inside, we go away from where we are aligned. And when we're out of alignment, no, we are not joyful, because we're not doing what we want to be doing. And when we are joyful, then that joy flows out to the world. So we need to remember to take a moment and breathe and make sure that we're doing what we want to do. It's like that school teacher who's teaching school but hates teaching math, and that's what the principal told her to teach. She needs to get out of that, or he needs to get out of that and begin teaching what he enjoys. Because if he's teaching something he doesn't like, what happens is he begins to hate what he does, and it's not good for anyone. He can't teach the kids. He can't get his evaluation straight for his yearly evaluation. Nothing goes well if you're not in line with what you want to do. And I don't know if that really gets into reframing joy, but I think reframing joy in my mind is being in alignment with who we are as people.
Carla, can I speak to that a minute?
Sure.
So part of, and I totally agree with you. Part of the problem is that early childhood programming. If you've been brought up to believe that being yourself is not acceptable, that you will not be loved, you will not be nourished, you will not be taken care of if you are yourself, then it will bring up fear when you start to step into yourself, being more yourself. That your mind, your ego will come up with a whole bunch of reasons why you shouldn't do that, that it's dangerous, that you're going to get in trouble, that people reject you. And we're social animals, we're social creatures. The response of others has a huge impact on our well-being. Regardless of what our brains tell us, it literally affects us physiologically. And if you're in a school and you decide, I'm not going to go along with what the principal, and you don't have any kind of support system, if you leave that job, you could get really depressed.
Right.
Also,
that's
go ahead.
Okay, go, Jeanne.
No, you go.
Okay. But that's the whole thing. If we are in alignment with ourselves, it doesn't really matter what someone else thinks. Earlier, Michelle, you told me I'm a perfectionist. I don't believe I did this very well. If you're thinking, and I hope you don't mind that I use those words in what we were talking about.
Carla, I can't believe you outed me.
Are you sure?
I'm kidding. Go ahead.
If we're saying that to ourselves, then we're not allowing us to be ourselves. And when we are ourselves, that's when we flow much more easier in the world. So we need to make that decision. Do we want to be who our mom said? Mom wanted me to be a doctor. didn't want to be a doctor, but I became a doctor. And I'm the worst doctor in the world because I don't want to be there.
I hear you. I hear you.
But I'm making this whole amount of money. I have to get out of it because I am not doing what makes me happy. I'm tired of the child sneezing on me or crying when I have to put a needle, give him a needle.
Oh
I
my
don't
gosh.
like that. I don't want to make that child smile then.
I hear you completely, and I think it's really good to experiment and find out what brings joy into your life, and just to realize that when you start to experiment, that ego may jump in there and give you a hard time. That's all I'm saying. It's
Right.
not that I disagree with you. I'm just saying that to not convince the people, our audience out there, that it's necessarily just a change of your mindset, that, oh, I'll do this and I'll be fine. There is pushback.
Well, that's because we allowed ourselves to listen to people who said, no, don't be the artist you want to be. Although you're a great artist, can't do that. Or, oh, don't become the teacher you wanted to be because teachers are really not doing what they want, what they should be doing. And look at all the paperwork they need to do. If we begin listening to that when we're a child, we do get that ego thing. But if our parents, and I'm not putting down parents, allow the child to grow the way that they begin growing and don't say, don't do that, then they can grow that far. It won't be that ego. It's how we have been brought up and raised and taught all our life. My mother couldn't stand my laugh, and I always had a loud laugh. It killed me sometimes to keep the laugh in.
Yeah.
And finally, I got around some people who said, hey, why aren't you laughing more? And I'm like, well, and I finally realized in time why I wasn't. And I had to say, I'm sorry, Mom, I'm going to laugh.
Good for you.
Well, I think there's two levels to this. We do have the ego versus unconscious versus superconscious kind of struggle in our mind all the time. But I think that there's even a more basic issue about it, and that's adrenaline. There was a point in my life where I used to think, well, my background is public relations and communications, and I managed a lot of crises. And you go through a crisis and you are at 100% and you can't be off, and you have to be thinking about, what's the next step and what's the next fourth steps so that you can tell everybody what they need to be doing. And you get through the crisis and finally you go, right? I found that I would get a little depressed because I became what I now refer to as adrenaline junkie. I really liked that chemical high that you get into when the adrenaline is flowing. And it was really prevalent. It's kind of a sad story, but my son broke his arm. He was at school and they finally called me around noon and said, we think your son broke his arm. And it happened to be a day I didn't have my car, so I couldn't rush over and go get him. So the ambulance had to come. There was a little funny side where this little 5-year-old put his hands on his hips, and the ambulance driver, EMT person, was saying, come on, we need to get in the ambulance and go to the hospital. And he said no. And she finally, he was stamping his foot saying no. And she finally said, why not? And he said, people go in there to die. So we did some reframing right away with that it takes you to the hospital. But they sent a car for me and got me to the hospital because Mom has to be there with a 5-year-old. And the whole afternoon, from then until 10 at night, I was 100% on this was a crisis. This was doctors. You need to do something. You need to take care of this, and I was large and in charge. Then he comes through. They had to put him under anesthesia to set his arm. And when he came out of the anesthesia and I was able to take him home, I got him home, I got him into bed, and I went downstairs and I just lost it. Because all the stress just hit me. But it dawned on me that in the middle of the crisis, I came alive. I became the leader that I wanted to be. I became the mom who's taking care of her baby bear, and somebody called to check on me and they said, okay, this is normal. And what you need to do is have a glass of wine, kick your feet up and just let loose. And that's what I ended up doing. But that's just a small slice to show you what adrenaline can do. So we get so used to having that drama, if you will, always you're having a high or a low, just it continually goes at it. So it's a chemical kind of reaction that we have in our bodies where our mind comes alive on a different level. And, when I mentioned, having the dogs or babies, they bring you into a different world when you're looking at unconditional love and you're just like, oh yeah, because you don't need that adrenaline to feel alive. And so when my friend told me last week that life was boring, I was thinking, oh, no, we need to reframe this, because it's not about being boring. It's about coming off of adrenaline. We can be just as addicted to adrenaline as we can to all the other drugs. And our mind goes at, 55 miles an hour. I'm trying to stay within, the federal regulations on the highway there, but our mind's going zzz, and we find that we love it. And then we're looking for the next fix. That's how I saw it when that person was talking to me, versus taking the time to stop at the stoplight, take 3 breaths and go, oh, wow, look, the sun is shining, oh, wow, did you see that flower over there? And pay attention to the world, because the world is going by in a blur when we're in that state.
And also the other thing is we've trained our minds to say, oh, I have a problem. Okay, it's okay that you have a problem, but you can flip that problem if you train your mind. I'm not saying it's easy to do in the beginning, and I'm still working at it, but flipping your mind to say, hey, yes, I have a problem. I'll take an example. Setting up an interview with someone and we can't get online. And we find out about it, either right there, right then, or when we're trying to get online and whatever. Well, okay, I can't do the interview. That was an hour of my time that I blocked off, but how can I use it now? I could really go out for a walk with the dog, or maybe it would be good to eat some food now instead of worrying about getting online. Or maybe I could just fall asleep again for about half an hour because I'm tired. Just flipping it a tiny bit and remembering that flip, there's always a good thing on the other side. It's not all negative, but we forget to look at that flip of the coin.
Yeah, I think that's true. But it takes practice is what I'm hearing.
Well, and what you were saying, Jeanne, is that you are addicted or you're habituated to a certain way of moving, as you say, the adrenaline rush, and you can get addicted to drama. Couples can have arguments all the time because that's the only time when they feel alive. And to learn a different habit requires risk, that is, of trying something different and giving it time to allow you to settle in. Meditation is not something that comes naturally to people. They actually have to learn how to meditate. Of course, it doesn't take much practice to learn how to breathe, and that's the first step. Carla, you had something.
Forget to breathe. I'm sorry, and we forget to breathe. We forget to take that moment and calm ourselves down instead of reacting, responding. And it takes time to shift the mind to think that, because for many years we've been just reacting. You know, if someone kicks us, we kick back.
Well, and to be supportive of that, when you think about the way in which the brain is wired, is that emotional response kicks in faster than it takes for the information to get up to the cerebral cortex. We're actually wired to respond quickly, and we have to learn a new pattern, which allows us to take that pause before we react. But it's not natural. The wiring is to react right away because it could be life and death. I mean,
but Michelle, could that be because we have been taught you just react instead of teaching? If we told our kids to take a breath when they get angry, if we taught our kids to step back before you react.
But I think that needs to be taught. I think that the wiring is that the limbic system responds a few seconds quicker than the cerebral cortex. And so you actually have to stop before you react. And you have to teach it, as you say, the parents need to teach that to their children.
Parents do.
Go, Jeanne.
As I say, parents do. As a parent, I taught my son a couple of things. One was to count to 10, and the other is he knew if I did with the face and the fingers that he was in trouble. But I taught him to count to 10, and I also taught him that timeout was not about punishment. Timeout was about collecting himself so that he could respond appropriately. And, I got to tell you, when a 6-year-old puts himself in timeout, that makes all the adults upset, because he did that in his after school care. And they were like, Chris put himself, he went into the cubby and stayed away from everybody. And so I said, Chris, what happened? And he said, a little boy hit him and he put himself in timeout. And I just looked up at the teacher and said, let him go. This is what he needs to do. But yeah, parents do try to teach. But what we teach to a 6-year-old is usurped by the time they're a teenager and hormones take over, because they turn into, little monsters that are hard to handle sometimes, but I taught them in a different way, and that's what parents have to do. You have to change how you teach the same thing so that it's received. But then we become young adults and adults. And I think the world takes over, and it's much easier to react, much easier to react. I mean, even in the social media world, it takes 2 seconds for bad news to spread around the world, but it takes a lot longer for good news to be retweeted. So it's an action that's broader than just how we react or respond in the world.
Well, and it's modeled on TV, isn't it? Because that's what gets the ratings up, is when people, or that's what they're measuring, is whether or not you have a visceral response to what's on TV. So it's all a lot of action, it's a lot of tension, it's a lot of drama, or sometimes they have humorous, funny shows, and that causes us to react in a different way. But I have a feeling the stuff that's fear and anxiousness causes more selling.
Yeah, actually that came out on 60 Minutes this week when they talked about Facebook. Fear is something that does catch people's attention, and joy doesn't as much. Although I will say, when I see a meme coming up that shows a beautiful, tableau of, my favorite meme is the angel sitting in a field in letting out angel dust, because that just makes me go,
yeah.
That goes back to reframing. What is it that makes us joyous? What does it feel like to be joyful? I'll go back to my friend who was saying, life is boring. For this person, action, connection, being in the thick of things made him feel like he was part of the world, where sitting quietly and breathing in wasn't giving him the kind of feedback that he wanted. And that's fine. I think we need to balance that. So when I said, isn't it great that you're peaceful, that you can pay all your bills, that you've got this job that you love, and started throwing things. And he's like, oh yeah. So it's like 90% is joy. We just don't see it. The 10% that's drama, we kind of, I want to say, glom onto, because again, it is that, shoot 'em up action thriller, MTV, you've got 90 seconds and you're gone, next thing over, short attention span, where when you're touching joy, you go into magic time. It doesn't matter how long it is. You're just there. And well, I know, go ahead.
It is a different system in your body. It's a difference between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. You are actually operating from a different system. And if you're used to the sympathetic nervous system and the excitation, and that's certainly what we get in TV, that's what we're brought up with, that's what we're encouraged to pay attention in school, go out to football games and scream and yell, and you're not used to the parasympathetic, it can seem scary or, as your friend said, boring. It takes a reframing and getting used to that different state. Once you get used to it, you can get addicted to being calm and quiet as much as you can get addicted to being excited. In fact, when you get used to that place of meditation and place of serenity, the other feels a little over the top. I think in some ways like sugar. If you get off of sugar and then you take it again, it tastes and feels horrible in your mouth. But when you're used to it, then it feels like great. Oh, this is so exciting. It's you have to acclimate your body to it.
Interesting. Carla, you look like you're ready to say something.
No, I'm listening right now. But I can always say something. I have a big mouth. But when we're talking about joy, and everything you're saying are things coming at you instead of looking inside of you. Joy to me is not the same thing of happiness. To me, happiness is what's going on around in the world. Joy is already there inside our bodies. Joy is deep within our hearts, and we miss it because we don't go to that fountain of joy within. Everyone has that fountain.
Can I say, oh, go ahead. But then I want to say something about that because you've spiked something for me.
And I know what you're saying, that, yeah, you need to be taught to meditate, but we don't have that as part of our curriculum in schools. We don't have inner growth as part of our curriculum. However, that is the basis of all instruction. Our breath and being aware of our breath is the basis of everything we do in life. Unless we're breathing, we're gone. The second we stop breathing, we breathe that breath, but put out that last breath, we are gone. But that fountain of joy and that breath is always there. And we lose contact with it. And by losing contact with it, we lose that ability to be able to reframe joy inwardly so we can take it outwardly. Okay, Michelle, I'm done.
So what I sense from what you're saying, Carla, and I totally agree, is that connection to spirit, higher mind, the universe, however you want to define that, is joy. That when you are in connection with who you really are, your authentic being, spiritual being having a human adventure. That's where the joy is. And yes, we get taught in childhood to ignore that part of ourselves because it may not seem functional to survival. And therefore, you learn the things that you need to do to survive in your family. And unless you have a family that really is spiritual and can teach you how to be in spirit, you might tamp that down in favor of survival because that's what the body wants. So for me, I see it as this tension between spirit and the agenda of the body. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe that you can partner with your body. And in fact, that's what you want to do. But I just want to share with the audience out there some understanding that it's not necessarily easy, that it isn't necessarily just a mind choice, that it actually is a practice, just like everything else that you have to practice in life. You have to do the practice of meditation or connecting to your higher mind or connecting to what you love to do.
Well, you can't find that joy unless you have learned how to find it. I mean, the bank robber across the street may want to think he'll find the joy when he goes across the street and he robs a bank. But that's, maybe he got away. And the joy was in that excitement. But once that excitement is gone, that inner joy is still there, but he has lost it.
Well, he's fallen asleep. He's lost touch with it because, as I said, there are these two nervous systems, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, and they don't occupy the same space at the same time. You have to shift. And that's where that whole framing comes from, too, is that you literally shift from one to the other. And there are tools you can use to make that shift. That's what mindfulness is all about, is shifting into that other state of being. And sometimes even a different state of consciousness.
I kind of want to disagree a little bit with the concept that you have to practice, because I want to go back to when we were kids. We actually lived in that state of joy. We are in the moment because kids don't know anything other than. I'm watching my 2-year-old with his pile of toys, and he pulls out something that I think is a block, or I haven't a definition of it, but he is not playing with it the way that I think he should, because he's got a whole different idea, and who knows what it is. I mean, I will just, humble brag here. My grandson can jump over a baby gate in 12 seconds when he was 18 months old. So he's a mover and a shaker. And I just watch him with great interest as he lets his imagination flow. And we get that, as you so aptly described earlier, we get that kind of trained out of us as we grow. So I think that it's there innately. And one of the things that I hear a lot is reclaim that childlike self. And I've heard it a lot. And I will tell you, the first thing that I go to is, how, where do I find it? Because many of us don't remember. We have to remember a touchstone of something. Like I had a stuffed Yogi Bear, that we lost in all the various moves that we were in. But when I start to think about that, then I remember, oh yeah, there was a little girl, and I remember her always having messy hair, because my hair would go everywhere, because I was running around and being, as active as my little brothers, but that moment of being childlike, that's innately in us, and we forgot, even though it's still alive. And sometimes when I don't know who came up with inner child, but when people are doing inner child work, you do have a glimpse, but it's usually the upset child that you're getting a glimpse of. But that's
the noisy one.
Yeah. The one that's being told to shut up, the one that's getting, I remember my dad putting us in front of everybody on his, he had this bar piece of furniture, and he'd put us on it and make us sing. And, you know, of all things, the song he made us sing was "How Dry I Am, How Wet I'll Be If I Don't Find the Bathroom Key," you know. And all the adults were laughing at us because my brother and I are like, "How dry I am," you know. So you can imagine a 4 and 5-year-old doing that.
That's
but
hysterical.
We don't remember that, or we don't, it's not treasure's not the right word, honor, you know, that kind of joy is really what we need to be. That's the mindfulness. Kids are in the moment. Kids are in the present because they don't have a past to remember. They don't know to remember it. You know, I'm watching these little kids and going, oh God, I really want that. So there are various other ways to reach it. I know that there's journaling and there's tips, but Michelle, you said, you know, mindfulness gets us there. What are the kinds of things our viewers can do to just get a glimpse of that level of joy that's innately in our hearts?
Well, at the risk of taking us down a rabbit hole, I've been reading this book by Michael Pollan on how to open the mind. And it's about all this research that they've done on psilocybin and psychotropics or psychedelics, that what happens that it actually shuts down a part of the brain, which they call, let's see if I can remember the name of it, the default mode connection. And that's where they have studied and done experiments that's where the ego resides. And when you shut that down, your brain just opens up and it creates connections that it doesn't normally make. Because when that default mode connection is it, and it's the valve and it's everything flows through it, when it's active, it actually limits what you can do. But when you don't have it operating, when it's offline, oh my gosh, the things that your brain can do is amazing. And what they have hypothesized is that the child is actually living that life that you would have if you were taking psychedelics, that they see the world in a very different way because they haven't developed that part of their mind yet. So what can you do? Well, you can actually get to that place. You don't have to take psilocybin. I don't recommend that you do that unless you're doing that with somebody who's guiding you. And I think they're now allowing that kind of research to happen. But meditation is the other way in which you can shut down that default mode connector. And
interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I just got all this stuff, read all this stuff from 2 different books. And it's, it's like the neuropsychologist, the study of the way in which the brain works. It's amazing where we are being led in terms of finding out how we function. So this ego, when a lot of the psychological problems people have is because they have an overactive or overconstricted default mode connection or network that makes you too hyper aware and concerned about yourself. That's the ego. But if we can do practices, and there are a lot of them that take us out of that, such as hanging out with dogs or babies or kitties, or going out into nature, that it will actually resonate. We will resonate and align with those beings or entities. And that's how I get out of that default mode network.
That is very interesting. And it tells me that the whole, 60s revolution was just a little before its time. I have heard that they're doing research of that nature, but the fact that we have a default mode that's kind of driven by the ego is fascinating, because some of us have very strong egos and it's hard to turn that off, and it's there to protect you. That's the one thing. A lot of times I hear from people, you need to turn off the ego part so that you can do this. No, the ego's there to protect you. And rather than turn it off, which I think was being said as a way to help me learn how to meditate at the time, I was like, no. If it's there to protect me, I need to work it in. I need to make sure that I'm going to be okay. And once I'm sure that I'm going to be okay, then it can go to the background. So sometimes when I go into meditation, I say, okay, ego, take a nap, or, okay,
or
ego,
holiday, take a break.
Yeah, I got it. I need 5 minutes of working with the right brain. Sometimes I simply say, left brain, you're going at it too much. Right brain, step up. And it's a weird conversation to be having, but when I can't go to sleep, I'm like, okay, left brain, I'm done. You need to stop. You need to stop. I need the right brain to, and it helps me to finally let go so I can go to sleep, because you've got so much going on in this mind that, I'll be right there, Carla. This mind that we've grown up with, that I've had, I'm not going to admit to how many years of saying this has to be better. I have to be logical. I have to be doing this. I have to be doing that. I mean, literally professionally trained out of me to be creative, so it's a very strong thing. You'd think with all this logic, I'd be better at mathematics, since that's the science of logic. But I feel like there's an inner push me, pull you. And if the adrenaline takes over, which we've talked a lot about, then the ego mind gets stronger, because you have to be very logical to get through that. But finding that push me, pull you, so that it's not this or that, but it's right in the middle, that balance. I think that's the balance that we've always been looking for, like work-life balance and such. But it's not about giving up one to get to the other. It's about being on the seesaw and figuring out the weight of each, so that you can stay, in stasis there and enjoy. Because you need to have a little bit of this ego, left brain logic, and you need to have a little bit of this creative, expansive mindset. And somewhere in the middle is magic.
I totally agree with you. It's like my saying, well, the spirit needs to learn to partner with the body. It's like the body has its own agenda. And the spirit can't do anything in this three-dimensional plane without the body. That's the way you get through this life. So you have to learn to work and recognize that there are certain things, and be kind to yourself. That's what I want. I want compassion. Have compassion for yourself. If you act certain ways and you're stuck in certain habits, understand that you didn't choose that was part of your upbringing. That doesn't mean you can't change. That doesn't mean that you don't want to change, but to have compassion for yourself.
Carla.
I agree wholeheartedly. We are not kind. We're kind to others, or we think we're being kind to others. But then we come back to ourselves. And Michelle, I'm going to call you out again.
Oh, here she does. She's outing me again.
Because you said, I gotta be perfect. Darn it.
Yeah.
Only be the perfect Michelle. Jeannie can only be the perfect Jeannie. And I can only be the perfect Carla. And we're all going to be different. And our perfections are going to look different regardless of what we think. However, we have to realize that there's something that we all have together. And whether you are the bank robber or you're Jeannie or you're Michelle or whoever, we all breathe the same air. And that is what sustains our lives. That is what sustains everything we do. Now, when you think of that, how do we connect with that? It's not really easy, because we've never begun to think about this. We need to remember, if we take a deep breath at a moment of stress, it's going to help lower the stress. Many of us forget. I forget. I had an amazing conversation with someone the other night where we had decided on something and we were going to do it, and we're still doing it. Please don't get me wrong. But there was a miscommunication. So we began this whole argument, and I said, wait a minute, let's take a breath. Let's stop for a moment and start reacting. The other thing that helps us remember, if we take a moment to do this, and often we don't because we get angry, the moment we put a smile on our face, there are two glands under our eyes. Very nice glands. Because the moment we smile, it sends a message to the brain to tell all those happy hormones to go through the cells and make every cell relax. Believe it or not, it happens within seconds. We forget to smile. We forget to laugh, which is even a quicker relief to stress. We don't realize that we have those three simple weapons inside of us that can bring us to that fountain of joy, not minutes later, not even minutes, within seconds, if we would only remember to use them. And we forget all the time. We forget to smile. Oh, I don't like what he said to me. And you go downhill very quickly. And when you're downhill, you take some breaths and you begin to relax. And when you begin to relax, you begin going uphill. And that smile comes back. It's remembering to use those simple things. They're free, people. You don't pay a cent to use them. But if you use them, they're going to move you further and quicker to where you want to be. And with that, I am complete. We only have about 5 more minutes.
So your 3 tools are breathing, smiling, and laughing?
Yeah. And also giggling or chuckling. Ladies giggle, men chuckle. But they forget. We forget.
Yeah, we do. And we let the adrenaline take over, which is like, well, Michelle said earlier, we're driven by caffeine in this society. And, I'd say caffeine and adrenaline are a lethal mix. We just need to balance it and make sure that we take that moment to breathe and to remember. Sometimes it's as simple as remembering who you are. And that is a very difficult question for many to answer. When I say, who are you really in the world? They're like, what do you mean? Like, are you, not what you do, but who are you? Are you a beacon of love? Because that's what I want everybody to say. I'm here to laugh. Victor says he's there to laugh and help people adjust their attitude. That's the perfect answer. I'm here to laugh and to help you laugh and adjust attitudes so that we can have a better world. I'd like to have something like that. I need to build that and emulate Victor. Changing attitude. So I think going back to our subject of reframing joy, there is a bit of changing attitude, changing what we expect and redefining what we expect so that we can take a moment. I know I've struggled with bosses in the past where they're going, you need to do this, this, and this, and this, until I say, okay, that talks about it. What you just listed is about 18 hours of work in my 7.5-hour work day. So what can I push off? And when I started to have my bosses take a look and say, okay, let me change my expectations, get this done by Friday, get this done by Thursday. Then my 18-hour day became, workable. So that was a really simple response to a very complex problem. I said, hey, I want to do everything you want me to do. Here's the list. Do you know how many man hours that is? So you have a choice. Get me an assistant or give me more time. And that helped reframe expectations. And I think I just answered a question that I had in the beginning. How do you reframe joy? You change expectations and realize that joy is inside, and that sitting quietly is okay. And, I'm remembering, when my son had a hard time sleeping and I finally got him to sleep, I sat on the couch and went, what do I do now? I was lost because I'd been struggling with him for so long. And here it is 9 o'clock at night and he's asleep. And I'm like, what do I do? And that was 20 years ago. And I still remember it because when I get into that, what do you do moment, then I go, oh, it's time for me to journal. It's time for me to paint. It's time for me to do something for me.
Okay, I want Michelle to say something because we are very
Wow.
close.
Oh, now I'm being called into the moment to have to speak. I love your ideas, Jeannie, about how to make the shift. And I think the other thing, which we have heard many, many times, is the practice of gratitude. And that is another thing, Carla's given the example of the smiling and the laughter and the breath. And you've given an example of changing your expectations. And I want to remind us all about the gratitude, because that's something that we really can do. You just look around the room and you say, well, what am I grateful for? Oh my, I'm really grateful for that rug back there. And oh, that thing on and pretty soon you just recognizing and enumerating the things that you can be grateful for will change your state of being and open you up to that higher consciousness and that joy.
And everyone can do it.
And everyone can do it. It's real. That's probably the easiest tool. Just look around.
Look around. Look at what you have. Stop thinking about what you don't have.
Exactly.
About what you have and be grateful for that. And having said that, ladies, we have been here talking for an hour, believe it or not. So it is that time to wave goodbye. But remember, people, take that joy. It's there inside of you. Find it. It's not hard to find. Just close your eyes and take a few deep breaths and watch your mind settle down. And when it settles down deep in the heart. And in the heart, you're going to find that joy. And with that, can we wave goodbye? Bye.
Bye.
Bye.